survivors, and welcome to another Walking Dead Road to Survival video. And in this video we are going to be taking a first look at Gold Mythic Shiva and Ezekiel, who are going to be coming to the game as an Ultra Token will recruit. This character should be released next week after the next CRW, just for your information. When it comes to the actual character visuals themselves, I think I'm a big fan personally of the kind of duo characters, as long as those duo characters also get their own separate characters as well. This is a duo that we've never seen as a duo, but they've always had separate versions of them, which is actually really cool. On the right hand side we can see the kind of duo pose. I do believe when you get this copy low grade, so like the first copy you get as a one copy, Shiva's like even smaller, like an even little tinier baby, which is actually kind of hilarious. On the left hand side you can see the art in a bit more detail. You are in a lot of trouble. That's what it says, it's in a lot of trouble. If we look at the stats at limit break 3, level 1600, Shiva and Ezekiel have got 16,746 attack, 33,493 defense, and 42,796 HP. This is going to be the first ever alert Shiva, I do believe. Oh no, it's not. There's been alert. There's been alert Shiva. Christmas Shiva, I completely forgot. This is going to be the tank role. Gold Mythic, of course, and is going to be joining the Day 1 Allegiance. Now, first thing we're going to take a look at is going to be the Adrenaline Rush, and it is called Animal Wrangler. It is a 55 AP cost rush. Taunt a line of enemies for 2 turns. Those enemies get crosshairs for 5 turns. This fighter heals 50% of their max HP for the rest of combat and gets 100% bonus HP. So, pretty interesting that the taunt for 2 turns is pretty good. You're going to be taunting characters into this character's special skill, and that's going to be the most important part, and effectively there can be some potential reflect damage because of that. The enemies getting crosshairs for 5 turns means that when they do get taken out, they are of course going to be decapped, and this fighter getting 50% of their max HP for the rest of combat and 100% bonus HP just massively increases the sustain on this character. Obviously 100% bonus HP is crazy, but 50% of their max HP for the rest of combat is very, very nice indeed. It's going to combat any damage over time, or if you are able to get through the bonus HP, the heal's going to be still there. If this character rushes multiple times, that heal over time will obviously stack up, so it could go from 50% to 100%, so on and so forth. Okay, so as we start the attack, you can see that I will be testing this out on an attack team, and this is just because I can, and it's easier for me to just show you. We'll get the character's Adrenaline Rush up, and I'll use it against the top line, and you'll see the characters get crosshairs for 5 turns, and they would also get taunted for 3 turns as well. We did have, 2 turns. We did have a resist in here, because apparently we have got a resist on a character. Oh, that's because of Clementine lead. Against defense teams, this might be a problem, but like I said, I don't think you're going to be using Shiva and Ezekiel against defense teams so much, but you never know. There could be a way you could use them. It maybe has some potential. I doubt it though. Jumping straight into the upgrades, you can see at grade 3 we get an upgrade where this fighter gets 100% bonus HP when this Adrenaline Rush goes off. This is only 1 copy required. Then at grade 5, which is 2 copies, that line of enemies gets crosshairs for 5 turns. And then at limit break 2, it gets an upgrade where you heal for the rest of combat instead of it just being an initial 50% heal. So when you obviously have a heal that comes in that's for the rest of combat, it heals you that turn, and then it will obviously heal you for the next turn and so on and so forth. But if it isn't for the rest of combat, it'll just heal you straight away and that's it. But it could potentially be a 2-turn heal instead of a rest of the combat. It's hard to know. But it's definitely going to be at least a 1-turn or that turn heal. But as this is the defense team character, you generally want to get them as high as possible. Defense team characters, you want to get all the stats possible on them so that they have the best chance of surviving for sure. And this Adrenaline Rush, you want this character to survive to be able to do it. It's actually not too bad, especially the crosshairs. It's kind of going to be underrated, I think, but when your characters are getting taken out on attack, you can have some cheese mechanics from other characters to just pick them back up, the likes of Zachary and so on and so forth. But that is not going to be the case in this one, because crosshairs means they're down for the fight. That's it. And that's 2 characters potentially once they're taken out. And 5 turns is a long time. A very long time indeed. So that's the Adrenaline Rush. Generally not like the best part of a defense team character's kit, but it isn't too bad. When the heal goes off, 100% bonus HP. You're going to really feel it. This character should have over 100,000 HP without too much of a problem, and that means they'll just instantly double their HP to effectively 200k plus, which is going to be absolutely brutal to have to get through, especially considering the special skill and especially considering some other parts of this character's kit. Now, one of those other parts of this kit is going to be the signature move, and it is called Bloody Keeper. It has an initial cooldown of turn 1, cooldown of 1 turn, number of uses unlimited. A line of enemies get attack up block for 6 turns and taunt for 1 turn. Enemies with less current HP than this fighter, max HP, get 10,000 bleed damage for 5 turns. Otherwise, they take 20% of this fighter's max HP as main damage instead. So this is actually just pretty interesting. The first part, the attack up block for 6 turns, is pretty brutal, especially against particular teams. There are teams out there that apply attack buffs consistently throughout the fight, and if they do, they won't be able to do it after that initial debuff comes in. It is only a line of enemies, but still, the taunt for 1 turn, again, you're taunting characters into this character's special skill, but even if it doesn't proc the special skill when it comes to the bide side of things, because it is vengeance, it will give the character AP to adrenaline rush faster to get the extra taunts to come in, the crosshairs, and all those heals. So that's obviously a problem. Then there's going to be the problem of bleed damage for the rest of, well, not rest of combat, but for 5 turns. It may as well be for the rest of combat. This can come up every other turn as well. So that bleed can stack up very high. It can stack with itself. So that could be really problematic. Just as a side note, could potentially use this character in other game modes. Maybe these difficult roadmaps, because it doesn't say when on defense. And 10,000 bleed stacking up constantly, you could have like 30, 40k bleed and just constantly be doing this signature with every other turn, which is not too bad. Otherwise, they take 20% of this fighter's max HP as main damage. Is actually what will most likely happen on those hardware reps, because they have high HP. And 20k of this fighter's max HP as main damage should be, 20% should be around 20k. I think this character should be able to get to 100,000 without too much of a problem. On a defense team, if you really build it specifically to get as much HP as possible, should I say, you should be able to get maybe 120k. So pretty significant damage, but there aren't too many characters on an attack team in wars and in raids that are going to have more HP than Ezekiel's max HP. It's just not really going to happen. So it's most likely going to be bleed a lot of the time. Okay, so this time around I'm going to be doing the snitch move. I have changed the leader to a different Clementine, and this is where it's going to get amusing. Some of these characters should take main damage, and some of them should take bleed, because Ezekiel has higher HP than some of them and not higher HP than others. I will try and taunt the top line. We'll just do it at the top line. And as you can see, the top line took main damage. It's because those 2 characters have higher than Ezekiel's HP of 81k. The other ones do not. So they take 10,000 bleed damage for 5 turns. Now, when this character is used on a defense team, it will most likely always be everybody's getting bleed for 5 turns of 10k. Most likely. Because I don't see anyone having, even right now, I don't think anyone's going to have higher than 80k. And he hasn't got an upgraded weapon. He hasn't got mods. He hasn't got any other modifiers to come in. On a defense team, he's definitely going to have that. So it's most likely going to be bleed for everyone who's on an attack team. But as you can see, like I said, there could potentially be some ways to do things when it comes to using them on road maps. We'll have to wait and see there. That's just a little bonus on top. Going straight into the upgrades, you can see at grade 2 we get plus 5,000 bleed damage. This is taking the 5,000 bleed damage that is already going to be applied for 5 turns up to 10,000 bleed damage for 5 turns. Then at grade 4 we get plus 10% main damage, making the current 10% main damage now 20% main damage instead. So it's either 10,000 bleed damage that someone's going to take for 5 turns, or that 20% main. That's only going to be 1 copy required. Then we get into limit break 1, which is going to be 3 copies. Upgrade that line of enemies, gets attack up block for 6 turns, and that is the actual line that he will target to taunt. And then in limit break 3 we get -1 to starting cooldown, which I think would be pretty important regardless of how you'd want to use this character. You want this to go off as early as possible. Early bleed is going to be very problematic, especially as it hits everybody. Very, very dangerous when it comes to this character being used on a defense team for sure. I don't know of how usable this character is going to be on attack, But who knows? Someone potentially could cheese it, and it'll be kind of funny. But definitely usable on defense, just on this signature move. It's like a ticking time bomb when it comes to how long this is going to take your team out. And if you try and gear up against this, it just does enable other characters on the defense team to just have a little bit more freedom to get their kit working. So yeah, bleed is not really too prevalent, I'll be honest. Every now and again I do see a Zachary on the defense team, and now we're going to have to be building those anti-bleed attack teams again. But this is obviously a great signature move, very powerful for a defense team. It'll be very difficult and frustrating to get through when you come up against Shiva and Ezekiel. Okay, so we are going to be doing a giveaway of 10,000 Ultra tokens. This is because Shiva and Ezekiel will be released on the Ultra token wheel. And all you have to do to enter is leave a like on the video and have a comment down below, just talking something about RTS, Shiva and Ezekiel, something related to the game. And then you'll be entered into the giveaway to win 10,000 Ultra tokens. Best of luck if you enter. Now back to the video. Now, Shiva and Ezekiel, of course, have some passive skills. These are the mythic abilities. We have got strength because they are a tank, so they have 40% critical hit resistance. This means that 40% of the time when they get hit by someone who hits a crit, they will reduce it down to non-crit hit, which is a massive reduction, honestly. And then we have special life as the next passive, which is 100% normalized resistance. Now, this can get bypassed by characters that are control role, so they can reduce it down to 60%. However, if you team up Shiva and Ezekiel on a team that has damage reduction like Regina lead, this cannot be reduced because the only characters that can do normalize that are control role characters have to do it on basic attacks and multi-hits, and that means they'd have to actually hit the character, and if they can't hit the character, they can't hit the normalize. And then, yeah, no normalize is going to happen. It's pretty much as simple as that. The next one is Predator Aspects. At the start of each wave and turn, 100% chance all other teammates get camouflage for 2 turns. And if there are at least 2 living control role enemies, all teammates get a Guardian Shield. This is kind of interesting. The camouflage is problematic, especially with the release of Ruben. He kind of is going to run into a lot of problems with camouflage being everywhere. The Guardian Shields aren't as much of a problem because I do see this character primarily being used on a Regina team, and that team already counters control role enemies quite heavily. But what you could do is spread Shiva and Ezekiel onto another team, and that would also make control role enemies have a little bit of a slight counter, because obviously control role enemies are everywhere. And on attack teams, if you look at all the control role characters that have been released, they're pretty much the primary damage dealers, and the primary good support characters are control role. So this is just another character coming out to counter what is basically the usable attack teams at the moment. And then we have the last passive, which is called Anti-Reflective. At the start of each wave and turn, 100% chance to remove counter damage reduction from 2 enemies. Now, I did show this one in my little teaser for Shiva and Ezekiel, and this alone is kind of nuts. But the rest of the Shiva and Ezekiel kit obviously is very, very powerful. If teamed up with Regina, it's going to be very problematic. If not, we'll definitely make another team just very much strong as well. So lots of problems regardless of what team Shiva and Ezekiel are going to be in. I think the majority of people would probably put him on a Regina team, but I think if you've got a lot of heavy characters, you probably could get away with splitting him up. Because he can't get normalized, he can be a counter to Danny outside of a Regina team, which there aren't too many counters to Danny outside of a Regina team. So that's how I could potentially see him being used. We'll have to wait and see when it comes to the defenses that people use in World Champions, but I think that's pretty much what I'd assume anyway. Okay, so we are going to start the fight, and as you can see, because we had 2 or more control role characters, the entire enemy team got a Guardian Shield. What I'm just going to show you is, this isn't just at the first wave, it's actually every single turn. So when we get to the next turn again, they'll all get a Guardian Shield again. So if you do take in 2 or more control role characters against an Ezekiel team, they'll be constantly getting a full team of Guardian Shields constantly, and this is going to be brutal. Now, you could potentially get through this with 1. For instance, Danny is a control role, but he is going to be countered a little bit because of this, because the Guardian Shield will stop his splash damage. Even though he can remove the camouflage, it will just be a little bit less problematic because of the fact that he can only get a couple of hits off And then if he hits the big boy himself, obviously there's going to be reduction. There's reduction because of something else in Ezekiel's kit, and that's why he's not going to take as much damage from Danny on his signature move anyway. Now, before we check that out, we will go over the upgrades on these passives. You can see at grade 1, he gets the first half of special life, which is going to be 50% normalized resistance. At grade 2, first half of strength, which is going to be 20% critical hit resistance. Then at grade 3, the second half of special life, making it 50% normalized resistance going up to 100% normalized resistance. Then we go on to grades 4 and 5. At grade 4, we get the first half of predator aspects. At the start of each wave and turn, there's a 50% chance all other teammates get camouflage for 2 turns, and if there are at least 2 living control role enemies, all teammates get a guardian shield. Then at grade 5, we get the first half of anti-reflective at the start of each wave and turn, 50% chance to remove counter damage reduction from 2 enemies. Then on to the limit breaks. We have limit break 1 going for another 20% critical hit resistance with strength 2, making it 40% total. At limit break 2, predator aspects 2 comes in, making a 100% chance all other teammates get camouflage for 2 turns, and if there are at least 2 control role living enemies, they will obviously give guardian shield to everybody. This can happen every single turn. So let's say you remove 3 guardian shields, they'll be put up the next turn, so on and so forth. At limit break 3, we do have anti-reflective 2. At the start of each wave and turn, 50% chance to remove counter damage reduction from 2 enemies. Obviously this will be a 100% chance at the beginning of each wave and turn once this is limit break 3 and fully upgraded. This means that your Maggie leads would, by the time it comes back to your team on turn 2, would have 1 character with counter damage reduction, because it would happen at the beginning of the wave, then it would go to Ezekiel and it would be his turn, and that would be 4 enemies having their counter damage reduction removed with just 1 remaining. These passives, honestly, crazy to increase Shiva and Ezekiel's power. He was already good, but these have made him really, really powerful, almost overpowered, especially that normalized resistance is going to be very difficult to get through this character. If you just put the right resist on him, taking him out is going to be almost impossible. I think there's going to be very few characters that can actually achieve decent amounts of damage against him, and then when they do, you saw even the limited amount of damage I did against him with my character Danny, you saw that he still built up 50% of his vengeance, and then he'll be one-shotting your characters on defense teams with his vengeance, because he'll have very high HP as well. So yeah, very, very problematic when it comes to this character's kit, particularly with these passives. You need to get all these upgraded if you do get this character up to LB3, obviously. Now, of course, the specialist skill is going to be Vengeance. I have talked about it a little bit. It's kind of obvious. You see it from the start. It is a very, very powerful specialist skill, generally speaking, but with 100% normalized resistance means that you can't really disable this realistically at the moment. And we'll just read through it. Store damage taken from attacks, actives, signatures, and rushes after storing damage equal to 30% of the max HP of this character, or when using the defend action, deal 150% of stored damage to 1 enemy immediately and reset stored damage down to 0. This part of it is effectively the bide part of it, and this would obviously one-shot a lot of characters, because if you've got 30% of your max HP, let's say it's 100k, and then you would be doing 45,000 damage every time this procs as a minimum. Most attack team characters wouldn't have that if they had 100% bonus HP, so they're going to be in a lot of trouble. Now, it does say does not trigger if killed. This is because the bide side of things shouldn't trigger if you actually just one-shot the character. However, the second part will happen no matter what, and it's when taking more than 30% of max HP in a single rush, active, or signature skill, deal that same damage back to the attacker and up to 2 additional enemies. And this is, of course, going to be the payback side of Vengeance, making it obviously one of the more problematic side, things that you have to deal with. If we think back to Vengeance on Peacekeeper, he had 70% normalized resistance. Was very problematic, but at least there was potential to get through that with some normalized characters. There are other ways around it, of course, but still obviously going to be a problem. Shiva and Ezekiel deal with one of those big problems that they have, which is the counter damage reduction that characters can bring to the table now. He's going to be periodically removing that from enemies, and that will be from characters, like I said, like Maggie, and characters like Ruben, and anyone else who is going to be applying that throughout the fight. Now the last thing we're going to look at is going to be Shiva and Ezekiel's weapon, and I will do one test with this because I'm sure someone will have a question about this. Shiva and Ezekiel's Guarding Claws is a 45% HP weapon with 40% defense, improved focus stun when being attacked, a 60% chance to stun the enemy and gain focus for 2 turns, and then in the last slot it's signature reduction, reduce all signature move damage taken by 75%. This is why the damage that he took from Danny was just kind of meager. It was very, very light tap for sure. And 75% reduction is the initial reduction, and then he'd have damage reduction, you know, on top of that based on his defense, so on and so forth. However, this could potentially stack with Regina's passive, where she does damage reduction when you get attacked, could potentially reduce any signature moves that do attack-based signature moves to 0. I can test that out just to see if that's the case. Okay, so we do attack again, and this time you're only going to take 1 control role character so I can actually do some skills against the enemy. If I hit this signature move from Raven onto Ezekiel, if it gets that reduced down to 0, it's because they do stack. And it doesn't look like they maybe do stack. He took a little bit of damage there. Just worth noting, he did take some damage. It will be a 75% reduction on these actual hits, which means obviously very, very little amounts of damage. So unless you put a weapon in his hands that has the reduction when being attacked, kind of like we have with that fast weapon that's sweating around, that new strong weapon, he can't get 100% reduction on a Regina team. However, against Ezekiel on a non-Regina team, he would always get 75% reduction when using a signature move against him. So that's it on my little preview of Shiva and Ezekiel, and he does look like, or should I say they do look like a very powerful pair. Without a doubt, the normalize resistance on the passives is the part that is going to make this character go from being like pretty good, like a solid, you know, 7 out of 10, to probably being one of the better defense team characters out there, just because there are going to be very limited ways to deal with that skill. And even if you do have a character that can hit it with a control roll, it's only going to reduce it down to 60%. So more often than not, he's still going to not get normalized. And dealing with this character in other forms other than targeted damage, like damage over time, might be problematic if you stack his resists, or if he's in a team with a character that obviously gives out reduction or resist as well. So definitely some decent team ups that you can potentially do with Shiva and Ezekiel. Regina team looks obvious, but I think there is probably another team out there that could be pretty good too. Let me know your thoughts on Gold Mythic Shiva and Ezekiel. That is the end of my video. I want to thank you very much for tuning in, and as always, keep on surviving, guys. Keep on surviving.